the table, even though they...
Yeah, that would look a little strange.
Right. So, first off, let me introduce myself. I'm Robert Desmelik, Newtontown moderator. My pleasure to kind of be the master of ceremonies tonight, and in a sense to moderate the meeting in a way. Diane Moran from the Cable Committee has organized this and providing it as a service to the people. I think it's going to be available on Zoom. I guess we maybe have a couple people watching, which is good. And also you will be available...
It'll be on the website.
On the website after the fact for people. So we're only going to focus tonight on candidates for the state representative races. We don't have the gubernatorial candidates or the senatorial candidates or anything like that. So it's things that are relevant to the local community. We have two different state district races this year. And I'm going to take a minute to make a little bit of an explanation about that, although some of our candidates are welcome to add to it if they care to. Every 10 years in the state of New Hampshire, we have redistricting as a result of the federal census of how many people live in what communities and what locations. That process is governed in part by our Constitution. It's done by the legislature. Inevitably, it brings in other factors. I think this year there was some litigation. There was bills that got vetoed. And I'm not going to try to go through the whole procedure or the history of it. But what came out this year was a different circumstance than what we had in the past. And I think the most important thing for voters who are not familiar with this, and I imagine the people in this room are very familiar with this, but for people who are not familiar with it, the key issue is instead of one representative representing Newton, we now have to vote for 3 representatives in one district who will be representing Plaistow, Newton, and Southampton, correct? And then we have an opportunity to vote for an additional representative who will be in what's known as State Representative District 36, what's called a flotarial district. That's one of those great vocabulary words for all the political science students that are heading for college. Look that one up. And that district, I'm going to read off the towns in it because it's a large group. And then I'm going to give my one-sentence speculative explanation of what happened. So the flotarial district, meaning that's kind of an extra representation. In other words, these to get more representation for the people in these communities. The community of Hampton Falls, Kensington, Newton, Plaistow, and Southampton will be sharing a representative from District 36. And our District 36 candidates are here. I'll introduce them in a second. But I just want to give my wildly speculative theory of what happened. And that is that the legislature sits in Concord. Concord's about midway up the state. And they started at Concord and worked their way out. And then when they got to us on the border, they said, oops, because they still hadn't quite got it all lined up and everything. But they realized that given the circumstances that were fixed in like 16 or 1700s, they can't take over Amesbury anymore. Merrimack's off limits, and Southampton and Newton are not one town anymore, even though we were in the early 1700s. So they had to do what they had to do. And so under the current circumstance, we have this new arrangement. I think it's good. I mean, we have in a way more people thinking about our community in Newton and representing us at the State House. And so that's a wonderful thing. But it does mean, if you're a voter, you've got to select 3 in the first race for District 20, and you've got to select 1 in 36. So with that said, we have 2 candidates that are on the ballot for state representative for Rockingham District 36. Ms. Elizabeth Costa on the left, Mr. J.D. Bernardi on the right. And the procedure here, just the way it goes in terms of the evening, is each candidate gets a couple minutes to introduce themselves, to make kind of opening comments as they see fit. And then we'll have questions. We normally direct questions to all candidates. So I'm not interested in questions. I basically want to have a question that each candidate can respond to. And I will say, for having done many of these in the past and because of the history of doing this, questions that are informative in general are most helpful. Occasionally we in the past have seen questions and lines of questioning, particularly in our local races, which are very specific and very aimed at particular people and kind of going back and forth with them. In those circumstances, I reserve the right to ask questions myself. And for those who've been here in a situation where that kind of back and forth got started, having me join the party is usually not what the people wanted. Because I'm pretty good at back and forth too, and if someone from the audience decides to pick on a candidate, regardless of who it is or what party it is, and go back and forth with them, they will probably see me go back and forth with someone else. And that will not be a pleasant event. And I think some of us in the room have been here when that happened in the selectman situation, so let's say that that's probably not what we want to do tonight. We want to have a dialogue and have questions which are broadly informative to the voters and not kind of a personalized back and forth between people. So, not that you can't ask a contentious question, but it should be one that applies to all candidates, not an individual per se. So, with that in mind, we'll start off, and you get 2 minutes at the end. Sorry for that long explanation. You get a couple minutes at the end. So let's start off. I'm going to just go kind of left to right, and then maybe we'll change the order so you don't get the first shot on every question. So, Ms. Costa, a couple minutes to tell us about yourself.
My name is Liz Costa. I live in Plastow. I've lived there for 19 years with my husband and 3 daughters. My children went through...
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, on a technical note, try to just, grab that wireless mic and, clip it on your lapels, the best spot, or your tie, or in JD's case, or wherever, somewhere that's...
As high as you can.
Yeah.
Because you have a loud voice.
Yeah, I know, I'm just talking loud.
Try it now.
Try it again. Okay.
Can you hear?
My name is Liz Costa. I am a resident of Plastow, New Hampshire. We've lived there for 19 plus years with my husband and 3 daughters. My children went through Timberlane Regional School District. I sat on the school board for just about 10 years. I was the chair for 2, was on the curriculum committee, capital improvement committee, personnel committee, so that got a little contentious on occasion. Policy, and if they needed some support elsewhere, I would jump on that committee to fill in that slot. Tomorrow I will be sworn in as a new budget committee member to the school board. So as someone has resigned and stepped down, and I was asked to please join that. Was also asked to join the strategic plan committee, but their schedule is a little bit too inconsistent for my work schedule. I have a master's in education. My focus is autism, early intervention, and intensive needs. I am not afraid to have the difficult conversations that sometimes need to be had, but it's done with respect, civility, and always listening to the other side so that you understand where they're coming from before you need to make that decision or steer them or guide them into another territory. I think that's it.
Thank you. Mr. Bernardi.
Yes, I'm J.D. Bernardi. I've been a resident of New Hampshire since 1975. I grew up in Minnesota. I went to university there. At that point in time, Mary Tyler Moore could walk down Nicollet Mall in Minneapolis, throw her hat in the air, and not get mugged. Now, since Barack Obama imported Ilhan Omar, Minneapolis is not the same. After leaving university, I joined the Navy Nuclear Submarine Service and was stationed in Groton, Connecticut. It did an overhaul at Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. That brought me to New Hampshire, and I stayed ever since. I did an additional 21 years of reserve duty after my 5 years of active. After 5 years active, I went to Franklin Pierce Law School, Law Center, which is now UNH, and after graduating from there, I worked for 7 different companies, essentially doing regulatory and quality work in the pharmaceutical industry. I retired 2 years ago. I ran for the District 16 seat, which currently is Southampton, East Kingston, and Kensington. Won that seat, became a member of the Science, Technology, and Energy Committee, where we attempt to keep our energy circumstances under control in New Hampshire as best we can. Within the town of Southampton, I have sat on the zoning board for either 10 or 12 years. I'm currently the chairman, and my kids went to school in the local Barnard School there, all 4 of them. They're all graduated now. So that's my history.
Thank you. So why don't we start off? Do we have some questions from the audience for our candidates? If you want, I can lead off with one sent in. Come on up, come on, you got a question, ask it.
Rick Faulkner here in Newton. And I got this suggestion from Matt, actually. Had this suggestion, not for this particular question, but for asking one of the LSA, or there's a couple LSAs, so the legislative service requests, LSRs, I guess it is. LSR. For next year, about cannabis or fines for selling cannabis. Just wanted to know what your stand was on legalizing or fining people for selling cannabis.
Ms. Costa.
Oh, I thought we were going to go left first, but that's okay. No, it's
So
okay.
I'll give you the
answer
start off
it.
on the next one. We'll
All
flip
right,
it back
all
and
right,
forth.
not a problem. I think that if we can legalize it, a small amount, it will help support schools, other funding that we need in the state that we seem to lack in some areas, Health and Human Services, Department of, God, I lost my train of thought. Health and Human Services, Department of Youth. I know in Massachusetts it's called DCF, but DCYF. Because I think sometimes those are the areas that get cut first when looking for budget decreases. And I know that there are some people that will say that, it's illegal federally, so we shouldn't, but we need to find a way, if we have no income tax, to subsidize some of our programs.
Mr. Bernardi.
Thank you. So these cannabis bills are universal. They keep coming up virtually every session. My opinion is that until the federal government deals with this, I do not believe New Hampshire should do anything to change the current circumstance. And the reason I say that is if we in New Hampshire would legalize or in any way remove the penalties associated with it, we are sending a message to our citizens that it's okay to use cannabis when it is illegal federally. So if your son or daughter wants to join the police force, the fire department, become an EMT, buy a firearm, now they may be prohibited from doing that. And they had no idea that that circumstance would arise, because they had no idea that when they decided to join the police force, they're going to say, well, have you used drugs, illegal drugs? No. Well, I don't think so, because it was legalized, but it's illegal. Same thing when you're looking to buy a firearm, they ask about use of illegal drugs. So you set people up for adverse circumstances that they don't expect is going to happen. So until the feds deal with it, and they're the ones that made it illegal in the 1930s, I don't believe we should touch this issue.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes, please.
You might know that there's 700 lakes in New Hampshire, and this was a tough summer. Most of the lakes were either infiltrated with invasive species or cyanobacteria. And some of the reasons for this are, of course, nature. It was a hotter summer than usual. But my question is, Do you have any thoughts on policies or programs to cut down on the cyanobacteria that really comes from runoff, from septic, from businesses, and snow plows that are using salt and harsh chemicals? The future, if this summer is an indication, the future is not looking good. And we have Country Pond, we have Powwow, so it could affect us right here.
Mr. Bernardi.
Well, any bacterial growth is going to be caused by additional nutrients. So road salt is not going to be a nutrient that's going to influence a bacterial bloom. So the cause of those blooms are going to be old septic systems or non-existent septic systems that are leaching into those ponds and rivers. To the extent that that problem can be mitigated, one's going to have to deal with addressing that issue, and potentially, the state could establish a program to evaluate those that are the main leakers and help citizens upgrade their systems. I sit on the Coastal and Marine Committee, and one of the issues that is associated with Great Bay is the increase of nitrates coming into the bay from septic systems, and so the requirements on virtually all new septic systems, if you don't have town water and sewer, is that you have a much more potent or well-developed septic system that will not leach into the the groundwater and into the rivers and streams and ponds. So I mean, that's the only way it can be dealt with is cope with septic system runoff.
And I'm just going to say I absolutely agree with you. Believe it or not. We agree on one thing.
It's the right answer.
It is. It is.
Other questions? I've got one from Mr. Roger Hamill, who sent some in, so why don't I put that one into the mix? I will note, for Mr. Hamill's benefit, if he's following up on this afterwards, his first question was about cannabis sales, and I think it was already covered by your question. I mean, I think the two questions are almost the same. So his question number 2. The New Hampshire GOP platform supports a Life at Conception Act guaranteeing the protections of life and personhood to the preborn under the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. This would define personhood as beginning at the moment of fertilization. This would necessarily lead to effectively outlaw all abortions. What changes to the current New Hampshire abortion laws would you be willing to vote in favor of? Ms. Costa.
If I understand this correctly, he's saying that there should be no abortion, correct?
No,
Or-
let me maybe I didn't. His question was in the context of the Republican platform
Okay.
on that issue. However, I think the key question is, what changes to the current New Hampshire
Okay.
abortion laws would you be willing to vote in favor of?
I think that the abortion law right now at 24 weeks is, with the conditions right now, are okay. I think we need to loosen it up because, not that I would say at 9 months, let's have an abortion, because that's an induction in a delivery of a child. But I do believe that we should extend it a little bit longer from the 24, even though a fetus can be viable at 24 weeks, and get the support. And I have worked with children who have been born at like 23 and 6 days, 24 and 5 days, and the struggles that those kids have, in that sometimes they do not survive. And it has to be the health of the mother and the child and what will be the safest for that situation. I believe that We shouldn't be rolling it back to 6 weeks. We should not be rolling it back to 15 weeks, as I believe there is some legislation ready to roll on that for the next session, because sometimes people are not aware that they're pregnant until they are 3 or 4 months because of their bodies. And that, you know, I think we need to compromise a lot on what is right and what is fair and what is appropriate in this state. And it's not 6 weeks, it's not 15 weeks, it needs to be the mother's choice, not choice, but conversations within her doctor's office and how we make that decision.
Mr. Bernardi.
Thank you. Yes, the current law is that abortion is prohibited at the 6-month or 24-week time point. That is entirely consistent with Roe v. Wade when they divided the pregnancy up into 3 trimesters, and they said state action is legitimate in the last trimester. And we do not, we have also adopted a provision that in the event that there's an issue with the life of the mother or fetal fatal syndrome, abortion exception can be made. Example there is a mother may be having twins and one has died or is dying and is causing extreme distress to the other twin. That circumstance can be remedied. As far as addressing future bills, this is exactly why we have a legislature and we have people to argue these issues out and come to an opinion that it represents the consensus opinion of those in each state. If you look at polls, 94% of Americans believe the 6-month time point is legitimate. Another of around 80% agree that the time point could be as early as the 3-month point, so 16 weeks or 15 weeks. If you look at where the Europeans have gone on this, other first world countries, almost all of them are 12 to 15 week endpoints for prohibiting abortion. Only the UK has 24 weeks, and only the uncivilized countries, in my opinion, of China and North Korea allow abortion all the way to the 9-month point. So I believe that there will be discussion on this, and where could I end up potentially voting? I could accept a 3-month line if that becomes a reasonable bill. I think it would have to, at that point, also add the caveat that we'll exclude abortion and rape from those circumstances, because at the 6-month point, that is really not necessary. One can know that early enough, but at 3 months, we may need to draw that line. So that's how I look at that issue.
Okay. Other questions?
Hi, so if you are elected and you do go up to Concord in January, what do you see as the most important piece of legislation on the agenda that you would need to address, putting aside the budget, because we always have to do the budget, but something else? So,
I think that's yours first.
Mine first?
I think that one
Okay.
goes to you, Mr. Bernardi, because we're flipping order here.
All right. Well, I am working on two areas. One is election law, and in election law, I think we need a QA procedure on the entire voting process. Right now, it's largely left in the hands of each town. Each town does a better job or worse job. There's a high degree of variability there. I think you folks in Newton have the luxury of being one of the best towns operating because of your moderator, but other towns are not so lucky. So a QA procedure where we see oversight from the Secretary of State's office to get good uniformity on that issue. Also associated with the election arena is a perennial question about the question of domicile. The New Hampshire Constitution says you may vote in the state if you're domiciled in the state. And that has been a point of contention. So what does that mean? And in various court cases, it's essentially turned out to mean that you are a resident of the town. Well, you can be a resident and you can be a temporary resident. So do temporary residents get to vote? Should temporary residents who really live and have their home of record in some other state be allowed to vote in New Hampshire? I think not. I think that issue needs to be addressed. So that is one area that I'm concerned in. I have another, but I'm only going to talk about one. So,
Ms. Costa.
I think the reproductive rights would be the first thing I would try and work on, because I do feel as though it should be a woman's right to make that decision, and government should not be involved in that at all.
Okay. Other questions? Ms. Moore, I think you have one, right?
If you don't mind, I have to read it off my screen, so give me a minute, yeah. So, recently, I ran into a situation in the town that we're trying to sign an agreement to have some services from Comcast. And I found out that we can't sign an agreement because there's a termination fee. This is according to RSA 32:8. Basically, it says that if you don't appropriate, the selectmen don't appropriate money for termination fees, you can't enter into any agreement. So I did some homework and I tried to find another company that could offer the same services. Every company has a termination fee. So at this point, our hands are tied. So how do we go about fixing something like that at the state level that at least allows us to enter into some kind of agreement that we can continue to get services?
Ms. Costa, I think that's...
That one's mine, shucks. I think that the state really needs to go and work with Comcast or other utility companies to look at what their contracts say and see what is reasonable for cities and towns. You don't know that you're going to terminate a service.
Correct.
So there needs to be some kind of clause in there. If they're not delivering what they state that they're going to deliver, there needs to be some kind of clause that is governed that gives you that out to not need to pay for that. That's the best I can do. Comcast wasn't on my mind when I was preparing for this tonight.
Can I clarify?
Of course.
So it's not just Comcast. It's
Okay.
any kind of service you purchase. If you look around, let's say your security system. If you look at your contracts, you'll see there's mostly a termination fee. Your phone, you'd have a termination fee if you don't honor the contract. This is tying the town's hands because we cannot enter into any agreement.
Without going to warrant.
Without what?
Without going to warrant.
Correct, without, so in other words, so if we needed to change service in, let's say, October, we can't do anything until March if it passes.
So I want to understand this.
Sure.
So you want to terminate service before the end of the
No,
contract?
we need to enter into a contract.
Oh, enter into
The
it. All
problem
right, I
is,
missed that.
because there's a termination fee, it's sometimes called an escape clause. There is no escape clause. Because if
Well,
we
it
were
is
to
for them.
terminate,
It is for them, that fee that you have to pay.
right, we can't account for that fee should we end up terminating and say in the second year.
Okay, so I would have to say that you need to, that those contracts need to be visited with the legislature to try and get something in there.
Okay.
I know that I owned a business for a little bit, and I had that same exact clause, and boy, it was hard to get out of that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bernardi.
I'm going to essentially agree with the fundamental premise that Elizabeth espoused here. You know, if the statute, and I'd have to review this statute and understand the context, and that's what you always do when you look at new legislation. What's the story? Why is it there? And what's it meant to do? And is it doing that, or is it doing? Does it have unintended consequences? What it sounds like, you're putting your finger on some unintended consequences here. Maybe not, but normally when you do contracts like this and you're entering into a big service provision thing, the reason a vendor may say, well, if you're going to provide services for X hundred people, we have to hire staff to take care of that and manage this service. And now if you're just going to snap your fingers and say we want out of it, then we have to lay these people off. So they want some kind of mechanism to cope with managing their responsibilities. So this can be dealt with by looking at that particular provision, seeing if it could be modified such that, you know, if you give notice a certain amount of time ahead of the expected termination point, or as Elizabeth mentioned, there are certain circumstances that arise, you can, you know, pull the plug. But we have to look at that legislation and see if that's a problem, and if it's a problem here, it's going to be a problem in other towns as well. I would want to understand that. Mass Municipal Association is a good organization that would potentially have information on how other towns are coping with this. So it can be dealt with legislatively if it's the issue as you propose.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the outside world?
No.
Other questions from the audience? I've got one more from Roger Hamill, which is his question 3. Was Joseph Biden legitimately elected President of the United States in 2020? Mr. Bernardi.
So to answer that question, I'm going to refer you to the United States Constitution as well as various state constitutions. And the United States Constitution says that electors are chosen or ratified by state legislators. And it also says that the state legislatures, not the governors, not the courts, but the state legislators set the rules by which the election is to happen. There are 6 states where that was violated: Arizona, Nevada, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. They violated that rule. Now, what is the remedy for violating that rule? There's none provided. So, at the end of the day, on January 6th, Congress voted on the electors that were there. Were they the legitimate electors? That's the question. I can't answer that.
Ms. Costa.
I would say yes, he was by a majority in the electorates, the 270.
Thank you. Any other questions? So, 2 minutes each, and I think we'll do our same flipping. Mr. Bernardi, you get the first 2 minutes for a sort of final statement.
Thank you very much. So my focus in running is to again advance and continue to build on the things that we did in the last legislative session. On a fiscal standpoint, we cut the business enterprise tax, the business profits tax, the room and meals tax, and started the elimination of the dividends and interest tax by cutting the budget 3%, giving over $500 million back to the cities and towns, and did not interrupt any government services. As a matter of fact, on education side, we established education freedom accounts. We fully funded full-day kindergarten, all the special ed courses, and public sector charter schools. We, on the mental health side, we purchased Hampstead Hospital to deal with mental health issues, which was a major concern and still is, as we are shutting down the Sununu Center for problems there. So in aggregate, I believe the legislature had a really good year and did very well for the state of New Hampshire. I want to continue to build on that, and I ask for your vote.
Ms. Costa.
Thank you for this evening. Should I be elected, I would like to work on those educational freedom accounts to put some checks and balances in place. That budget is up to $14.7 million plus, with no cap, no waiting list. I think that's really important to address. I would like to look at reproductive rights, and how it will trickle down and affect. I am concerned about mental health issues and concerns, opioid addiction, and the deaths I know that are occurring in Rockingham County alone, as well as the state. There's over 500 opioid deaths in the state currently. That was as of like September 15th, and we're just a month out from that. I know that there has been funds granted to the state from Purdue for their class action lawsuit. I'd like to know how that money is going to be spent and work with whoever to get that money placed into communities where it is truly needed, because it is an epidemic. And as a side note, I've watched several classmates of one of my daughters pass away in like 1 year. It happened about 3 years ago, and it was quite devastating for that class. I would like to see education overhauled a little bit with the curriculum, and looking at what is appropriate education, what should be funded, as well as special ed and how that is being handled. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So now we're going to have our candidates for State Representative Rockingham District 20. Just take a comfortable spot. Try to clip your mics on close, on a lapel or tie or somewhere so it voice. People that are listening at home or on video after the fact can. Right, let me just, first, before, as we introduce people, one of the people who would like to have participated is not able to, so he is going to have Mr. Gluck read his introductory message. He obviously won't be able to answer questions, but, so why don't we start off with that? That would be on behalf, you're speaking on behalf of Mr. Duncan. Yes, so Mr. Gluck, please.
Thank you. I am not Stan Duncan. I'm Barry Gluck. Stan sends his regrets that he's not able to be here tonight and has asked me to read this letter on his behalf. First, I want to thank the Newton Selectmen for putting together this very valuable gathering, and for my friend Barry Gluck for standing in for me while I am away. I have had long-standing plans to be out of the state this week and can't be with you, but he has graciously agreed to read my words to all of you in my place. I'll begin with a word or two about my background. In my lifetime, I have lived in several states and one foreign country. For the last 40 years, my home has been New England, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire. Vocationally, for most of my life, since the early 1970s, I have been a Protestant church pastor or a college economics professor, but have also been a few other things for shorter periods of time, such as a restaurant owner, economics commentator on NPR, a social worker, a pianist in a jazz club, and perhaps most unusually, for 3 years in the 1980s, I worked in El Salvador as an economic development advisor during their long and bloody civil war. I have never run for political office, but I have frequently been involved in political campaigns and political causes. I have served on the state or national boards of several mission and justice organizations. Some of them you might recognize, like Bread for the World, Jubilee USA, Church World Service, and Habitat for Humanity, for which I co-founded the Oklahoma chapter in the early 1980s. And because of that work, I spent many hours in the offices of state and national elected officials, urging them to support legislation that helped the poor, the weak, and discriminated against in our society and our world. And now that I have retired, I have felt called to work on a wider range of issues and causes as one of your representatives in the New Hampshire State Legislature. And that's why my words are being shared with you this evening. Some of the issues that I will be your advocate for as state representatives are women's health and reproductive rights, something that is popular in New Hampshire among both Democrats and Republicans, though the state legislature doesn't always seem to know it. Fair and accessible voting rights, including expanded mail-in ballots and voting hours that are easily accessible for working people. Right now, New Hampshire has one of the most restrictive voting laws in the nation. That could change easily and quickly with good leadership in Concord. The real and present dangers of climate change. Climate change is real, and it is deadly, and it is happening right now, as the recent hurricanes, droughts, and floods have shown us. A new study from the University of New Hampshire has shown that by the end of the century, New Hampshire will average 3 months a year with temperatures averaging over 90 degrees. There are a few bills in the State House that attempt to address it, such as one that would cap greenhouse emissions, but so far they have all been stuck in committees. If I am elected, I will pledge to work on that issue and see what we can do to protect our state and citizens from the coming destruction. Strengthening and adequately funding our public education system. Right now, it has been hurt by an expensive voucher program and insufficient funding. The state pays families millions of dollars to move their children out of our public schools and into private schools. And we are number 50 in the nation in funding our public system. Our state has been sued a number of times, most recently this past June, because of its unfair and uneven funding of public education. There are many fine private schools around the state, but public, accessible education is the foundation of our democracy and should be protected by all of us. And finally, promoting old-fashioned values of caring, concern, acceptance,
and tolerance for all people, and an end to efforts to divide us into angry camps of distrust and bitterness. There once was a time when people of the Granite State were known for a lively political atmosphere of give and take debate on policies before reaching a compromise that we could all agree on. We believed in a vision of the common good, and we worked together to get there. We can have that again. We can get there again. We can be the people that the world once admired for our ingenuity and team spirit once again. If I earn your vote for State Representative, Rockingham District 20, I will pledge to help us get there again. Thank you. Stan also mentioned that because he can't be here tonight, if anybody has any questions, my wife Tammy actually will record those questions, and he can respond. He can put those on his website, or he can respond to people directly if they would prefer. So, thank you.
Thank you. So, you probably saw the process, Mr. Harvey, I don't think so, all of it, but the basic rundown is, since you'll get it because you're going to be at the end of the line in the first round. So 2-minute introductions, question and answer, and everyone will answer. Each question's for the whole panel, in essence. And the order of questioning will rotate. So we'll start with the first question here. The second question will go to Mr. Summer, and so on. So take a moment to introduce yourselves, and we'll start with Ms. Bishop. Please spend a few minutes and tell us about yourself.
Thank you. My name is Nancy Bishop, and I am currently a resident of Plaistow. I've lived there for 6 years, and immediately upon moving there, I became a member of the board of directors because I am concerned about my community. I felt like that was the initial way to get involved. I have been following the state legislature and political situation in New Hampshire, and I do have concerns and interests, and it motivated me to run for state representative. I come from a working class background whose family earned their way into the middle class. I got a strong, solid public school education, and that I'm sorry, I'm going to say qualified me, prepared me for the 4 years I spent at university. That is something I would like to see for every New Hampshire student, a strong, positive public education. As Stan mentioned, I do think that's the foundation of our democracy. Early in my career, I was an early childhood educator and a residential school worker, and I also was a home health aide. In those capacities, I think I learned to be a bit more compassionate and understanding. When you deal with the public and those populations, you do develop, you develop a concern for their issues of the young, the elderly, and their families. One of the things I would like to address is the minimum wage. Currently at $7.50. I do not think that's even closely reasonable for a working wage. I think we need to respect the work people do and compensate them adequately. As a health aide, I made minimum wage. I understand the stresses and the anxieties, and I can't imagine, I happen to be single, but I can't imagine having that situation and having a family. So I would like to see the minimum wage raised. I also would like to see climate change addressed, and I think that's, as Stan outlined, the hurricanes, the severe weather, and the fact that we depend on the environment for our tourism, and it's a big mover of the economy. So I look forward to learning more about everyone and their concerns, and I hope that you will vote for me in November.
Thank you. Mr. Summers.
My name is James Summers. I live here in Newton, New Hampshire. The the founder and CEO of Exagira Networks, a corporation here in Newton, New Hampshire. I've worked in the IT field for the last 28 years. As far as my educational background, you see my MBA from Southern New Hampshire University. I'm currently a doctoral candidate, meaning that I just have a dissertation left, for my doctorate at Liberty University in Strategic Management and Economics. And I'm also a postgraduate at Penn State University in regards to sustainable business. As far as in the public life, I've actually served as a state representative at the state of New Hampshire for representing the town of Nashua in 2010. I served on the Science, Technology, and Energy Committee at that time. The biggest bills we had back then was the power lines up in the north, expanding high-speed internet up into the North Country, and at that time repealing RGGI, which was a carbon cap charge per carbon usage. My biggest bill then was I was a co-sponsor of the Right to Work bill. It actually passed the House, passed the Senate. It was vetoed by Governor Lynch, and it missed by 12 votes of overriding Governor Lynch's veto after passing the Senate the second time. As far as what I'd like to do up there this time, I'm actually, Right to Work comes up every 2 years, so I would definitely look at that again, maybe make some changes to it to see what the limitations are of it, not of passing or not. I would also like to, depending on the committee I get selected on, either serve on Science, Technology, Energy Committee again to actually improve internet access and accessibility to high-speed internet as well, or if not, in the Veterans Committee to be able to provide where so far members of VA have to go down to still Massachusetts for some services, and whether the New Hampshire is limited, and even see if there would be a way, or at least look into different avenues other states have taken to where veterans can go into public hospitals and then have VA reimburse it. I am a Desert Storm veteran, served in Desert Storm, and I was a member of the United States Navy. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Melvin.
Okay, my name is Charles Melvin. I've been a resident of Newton for 54 years, and I'm running for one of the 3 seats in District 20, which consists of Plaistow, Newton, and Southampton. I've been a representative for the past 2 terms. My voting record as a conservative is 97 to 100%. While in Concord, I have sat on 7 different committees. My first term, I was on environmental and agriculture, tough one. My second term, I serve on municipal and county government committee. The committee deals with town and state laws. I enjoy this committee because I have had a lot of experience in this topic. For instance, in Newton, I have been on the planning board I was on the planning board for 30 years, and I was on the zoning board of adjustments for 15 years. And I've served 2 terms as a member of the Board of Selectmen, where I sit presently. I'm also a real estate broker for Coco Early. I'm also a justice of the peace, as well as I'm a notary. I am a small business owner. I own and operate with my son, C&M Auto Repair in town for the last 52 years. I received the General Stock Protector of Freedom Award for the last 3 years. I've also received the American Conservative Union Foundation for Excellence Award. And if I get reelected, I'd like to go back to municipal and county because I'm concerned in home rule.
Thank you. Mr. Harb.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name is Bob Harb. I currently serve as a state representative for Atkinson Plaistow. And as you know, with the redistricting, our district now becomes Plaistow, Newton, and Southampton. But before I go into my biography about the things that I've done, I thought I should tell the people in Newton, I'm not a stranger to Newton, although I don't live here. My mother-in-law lived here, my father-in-law lived here. My sister-in-law lived here. I don't know how many Christmases, Thanksgivings I've spent at their homes in Newton. My nephews still live here in Newton. I taught karate at Empower Martial Arts down the street. I also, my whole family for over 20 years have been equestrians and were members of CPM Stables, also down the street, and friends with many other equestrian facilities in town. So when you look at me and say, is he just thinking about Plastow? No, I'm thinking about the whole district, and I have connections with Newton. In the 2 years I've served in the State House, I've moved up to Vice Chair of Resources, Recreation, and Development. It's a nice name, but what does it do? We take care of all the lakes, all the rivers, all the waters, including the parts of the ocean that the state can control, all the parks, all the trails, and that's the committee I've been able to serve on for 4 years and moved up to vice chair. That committee really acts nonpartisan. We had our last executive meeting today to vote on the final bills for this year, and all those leaving, whether they were Democrat or Republican, said this is a great committee to serve on, because in that committee, like all committees, we are concerned with what's best for New Hampshire and also what's best for us here in this district. I currently also serve as the town moderator in Plastow. I'm about on my 11th or 12th year, I lost count. I currently serve as the Timberlane School District moderator. I'm the chair of the St. Luke Evangelist Parish, which includes Mary Mother down the street. I'm a director of the Plastow YMCA that also serves the people and the kids and those that live in Newton. I've served on numerous equestrian organizations and also service clubs. In Plastow, I'm the past president of the Exchange Club. I also am a member of the Plastow Historic Society. Community service is important. My real life job is I'm an attorney. I've been an attorney about 47 and a half years, licensed in New Hampshire and in Massachusetts. My real desire is to continue to give back to the community. Serving in the State House is giving back to the community in addition to all the other nonprofit organizations I've belonged to and serve. I think we've done a great job in our committee resources to protect our water supply, to help bring water to Plastow, that is one of only 2 towns in the state that has no standing body of water. I think we've accomplished a lot at the state with economy, giving back money for the schools to lower your property taxes. I think we've been successful in the years that I've served, and I ask for your vote and support to send me back to Concord so I can continue my service to these communities and to the state of New Hampshire. Thank you.
Thank you. So, questions from the audience. We have another panel. I am guessing some of the people who had questions before may have questions this time. I'm glaring at one of the people. But I'll tell you what, I'll start it off because I do have Roger Hamill's questions. And so I'm going to ask his first question, which was similar to one of the questions asked earlier. Question 1 from Roger Hamill. With retail sale of recreational cannabis legal in states bordering New Hampshire, what is your position on the legalization of retail sale of recreational cannabis in New Hampshire? Ms. Costa.
No, Bishop.
I'm sorry. I'll get with that. My apologies. Sorry, Nancy. Ms. Bishop. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
It's the cannabis. Just thinking about it, my mind's not clear.
I do agree that we should legalize cannabis. It is legal in all the states around us, and I think with enough attention to community and services to help the needs of people that may get in trouble with it, I think we can cautiously proceed with it.
Thank you. Mr. Summers.
While I see the tax benefit of it passing and where it could be used, There's states like Colorado who have found that 140% more accidents and vehicles have happened because of people DWI with intoxication of marijuana. It also, with states like Oregon and possibly even Pennsylvania this year, where they've legalized hard drugs to where they've had problems now where they have drug addiction viewable on all other streets and all over the entire community. And it's still against the federal law. So while I do see the tax benefits of it, and I've heard plenty about that, I'm actually against it at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Melvin.
Well, I'm going to be honest, I'm in favor of it. Canada does it, Massachusetts does it, Maine does it, Vermont does it. How are you going to stop anybody from New Hampshire from doing it? You're not. It's there. We can use the revenue. I think the revenue, though, should be put to rehabilitation, not just balancing a budget.
Mr. Harb.
Thank you for the question. I have two reasons why I would oppose it. One is the safety of our youth. This question has come up before, and as a state rep, I got numerous calls from school officials, leaders, asking me to vote against it because they were concerned with the effect on the children in high school and grammar school. They told me about the rampant vaping that goes on, and they pleaded with me not to support it. So that's the first reason. The second reason is you heard me say I'm an attorney. I took an oath. I've taken a lot of oaths to uphold and support the Constitution and laws of the United States. All of us as representatives take that oath when we get sworn in by the governor. I cannot vote for it as long as it's a federal crime. My memory is during the last presidential election, all the candidates had said that they would move forward to make it legal. It still is illegal. I understand that some of the enforcement's been cut back, but it doesn't make it legal. It's still illegal. So for the benefit of our youth, to support the school officials that asked me to not support legalizing it, and because it's currently a federal violation, at this time, I'd have to say no, I cannot support it.
Thank you. From the audience, a question. Do we have any questions from the audience? Mr. Byrne.
Re-ask my previous question if I can remember it. So if if you were to get elected, go up to represent us in Concord in January, what would be the number one piece of legislation on the agenda, except for the budget, that you think is most important to address? Thank you.
So, Mr. Summers, you're going to go first because we're rotating.
The one that stands out to me the most, and it's been a controversial issue over the last year, is it's my belief that parents should be able to control or at least have say in what their students learn. We have learned this from the states of Virginia. We have learned this from other states across the nation that have had this argument about things being taught in school districts and school systems where the parents do not agree with it, or it's totally against their values. If we want to increase the acceptance of public schools and to actually, as the folks said earlier in the debate, to have more people be able to go to public school and to view it as a viable source, then at that same point, parents shouldn't have to be able to take their kids and put them into private schools because they can at least be able to understand and know what their children are being taught. Parents should be able to have a say in what they're learning and shouldn't be able to be taught things that are outside of the norm realm as of right now.
Thank you. Mr. Melvin.
Well, usually we get around 1,000 bills, so it's pretty tough to pick out one. But my big one is critical race theory. I'm so much against that, it's unbelievable. And that's the way I'm going to leave it.
Mr. Harb.
I'd like to thank the gentleman for his question. It is a good question, but a difficult question, because I think with the 400 state reps, everyone would have a different prime bill. But because I'm on resources and recreation at this time, my prime concern would be the environment and making sure every resident of the state of New Hampshire gets clean water to drink. My bills that I would be concerned with would be to support the health of all of us that drink water, whether it's private source or public, and to tighten the rules concerning arsenic, PFOS, and PFAS in your drinking water. We all know our bodies are made up of a large percentage of water, and we can't live without it. So I'm concerned with what's happening to our water supply and the environment, and the committee I'm on addresses that. So I would be concerned with, to continue to support bills as I have in the past to make sure you all have good, clean, potable water. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
I think I would address the woman's right to choose, and I think we need to protect women so they have equality.
Thank you. Questions? Do we have any questions? Anybody from the outside world?
Nope.
Anybody in the audience? Yes, sir.
I'll ask a similar question that was asked, like I think the first question there. I'm not sure how he put it, but just yesterday, actually, one of the House committees, the House Judiciary Committee, voted against continuing on with HB 1181, which was to allow biological fathers to petition a court to enjoin biological mother from having an abortion. Would you support such this? And the people who put this forward said they're going to put it forward again this next session. Would you support such legislation or other restrictions against abortion access for women?
Mr. Melvin.
Well, I got to be honest with you. I feel that the father should have a right. And I know the bill was killed, because I read it this morning on my phone that it was killed. But I do believe that the father should have some sort of rights. He has to pay support if they have the child, so you might as well let him have some of the rights.
Mr. Harb.
Thank you. I'm not familiar with the context of HB 1181, but I would say unless the father has waived his rights, he should have a right to seek regress in the court. Then it's up to the court to have a hearing, to listen to both sides, and to then make a decision for the best interest of the child. That has always been what family court has been about, best interest of the child, and I totally support that. What's in the best interest of the child? Thank you.
I totally agree with Bob. It should be what's in the best interest of the child, and I would support going to court.
Thank you. Mr. Stump.
I agree as well. As the father has just as much legality as the mother with the child. At the same time, you have to know the whole circumstances, the entire case. So therefore, going to court and hearing both sides is what's important in this case.
Thank you.
Could I just, I had a second part to that. Would you favor other further restrictions to women's right to access to abortion, more restrictive than what's currently the New Hampshire law?
Mr. Harb.
And at this time, I would not. I thought a lot of thought and compromise and discussion went on with the current law, which allows the right to choose, but also at a point after 24 weeks proposes to protect the unborn infant. So one has to be a Solomon in a question like that, and I think the legislature tried to do the best they could. So I would support the current law.
Ms. Bishop.
I want to change my response to the last thing I said. As soon as I responded, the circumstances came up in my head where a woman would be in a very tight situation and maybe would need an abortion, and maybe perhaps an abusive partner would challenge her in court. And I do think, to protect the women, that we should not allow the men to petition for abortion.
Okay. And why don't you also address the, I mean,
And I don't
the
want
second
any more
question.
restrictions.
Okay, fine, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Summers.
Right now, with the 24 weeks, I view that this, as a state New Hampshire law, I believe that it's good as the way it's written. The viability has always been tough, and it was even tough for other courts to be able to decide at that point. But with premature children becoming healthy, look, as of right now with the science, starting around the 6-month mark, then as science improves, it might move down over time, but right now I agree with the state of New Hampshire law.
Mr. Melvin.
Okay, I voted for the 24 weeks, so that I spoke to Tammy about this, and I do believe very strongly my body, my choice. I also believe that if there's incest, rape, or the life of the mother, then you should be able to abort it at any time, but it definitely has to be known. I voted for the 24 weeks because the ultrasound was in it, within the hopes that if the mother decides to have an abortion, then she gets to see the child. Maybe she'll change her mind. That's why I voted that way.
Thank you. Other questions?
My turn? Okay. So, I asked this question last to the other two candidates, so I'm pretty sure everybody was here that heard it, so I'll try to rehash it the best I can. So here at the town, we trying to enter into a contract with a service provider, Comcast, and it could be any service provider. But because there's a termination fee with no escape clause, and we cannot appropriate money for something we don't know that's going to happen, basically, and it pertains to RSA 32:8. So how could you help us enter into agreements like this, or change the law to help us, to help towns, municipalities be able to enter into agreements with termination clauses in them?
Are you saying that you went into this contract not realizing there was this termination fee?
No, we have not.
No.
We cannot.
Yeah, maybe just try to throw in a background, because the first time I heard that, I got it, but and correct me if I'm wrong. Let me just say what I think is the background. The RSA in question prohibits the town from entering into a contract which has a termination fee. And that makes sense, because the termination fee could be a large amount of money. The problem is that every generic little contract that you get that's got boilerplate in it, like getting a
Comcast.
cell phone,
Yeah.
getting an internet connection, has that in the boilerplate. So technically speaking, the town probably cannot get a cell phone.
Yeah.
Right? In other words, a $30 a month cell phone contract for a new town employee is probably illegal. I'll bet the town does it anyway, but it's probably illegal.
I'm not saying anything.
Yeah, they're not saying anything. So that's the issue. What is your position legislatively about the issue? Should there be a change? Maybe that law should say if the termination fee is over $10,000, or over $1,000, or over $100. In other words, what is your feeling on that issue of kind of town rule? And should towns be able to enter into contracts that may include a termination fee without previously binding themselves to the termination fee, right? Because the legislative body hasn't done that in the town. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that was
All right,
very
that's
helpful.
the question. Sorry, I'm just helping.
No, thank you.
That's the question.
I'm happy you clarified. I think that the RSA should be changed, and I think there would be a consensus of various municipalities that would want to work on the issue together. And I think our representatives And the municipalities should negotiate and negotiate a different feasible way. I understand about the sake of the company having to lay off people, but I think that should be explored more, and people try to come up with more creative solutions.
Mr. Summers.
Not to get into too much legal speak, but I've dealt with this in my own business, and it actually pertains to an RSA within the state of New Hampshire could tie in this effect if the company that created the contract is within the state of New Hampshire. Once you go to, in this example, Comcast, or somebody outside of the state, which they're incorporated, I believe, in Delaware and located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, they actually, because it's interstate, it actually fall under the Federal Commerce Clause. Therefore, a RSA at the state of New Hampshire would not be able to affect a contract that is interstate or across multiple states.
Mr. Melvin.
I know what Diane's faced with. And the only thing that I can say is I agree with her that it's definitely a big problem. And if she's willing to write something up, I'm willing to put a bill in.
Okay, I'll see what I can do.
Mr. Hart.
Well, I'd like to say that I'm a Reagan Republican, not just because I went to the University of Notre Dame, where the Gipper was famous, but because I believe in lesser government and more home rule. I tried on my phone, because I won't say I'm an old man, but I'm getting there. I tried to find this statute, because as a lawyer, I always was told, read the statute first before you comment on it, and I haven't memorized it, and I couldn't pull it up quickly. But in general, I think that we should allow the towns to make a contract with provisions that they think would be applicable and not tie their hands and limit them. If that takes a home rule with Representative Melvin, I'd be happy to work on that. I'd be more specific, but I can't pull up this actual statute and then I would comment on it. But
Okay.
I hear your problem and I understand it, and I would support something. I believe in local rule. People should rule, not some big institution.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the audience? I'm really pushing on the audience for a question, but I don't hear any. Okay, so I'm going to take the one final question I have, because we don't have any from our web viewers. They're all watching another show on TV, I'm afraid, unfortunately. This is for Mr. Hamill. His question 3. Was Joseph Biden legitimately elected President of the United States in 2020? And I believe in the rotation, Mr. Summers, I think that starts with you.
Because of the fact that that he actually received more than 270 electoral votes, then yes, he was legitimately elected.
Mr. Melvin.
Not in my opinion.
Mr. Harb.
As an attorney, I have to say I believe in the rule of law. The law was he was elected, and I would say he was properly elected.
Ms. Visser.
I say that he was properly elected as well. He got 270 electoral votes, and the Congress ratified it, and so he is the president.
Thank you. So, do we have any other questions from the audience? Hearing there are none, our panelists have their final 2-minute say. And I propose we simply flip the order. Are we comfortable with that? So we don't, because we're not having that many rotations. So, Mr. Harb, why don't we start with you and we'll work our way down this way.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'd like to thank the town and you and all those present and those watching on cable for this opportunity to learn a little more about me and to share and visit with all of you. I look forward to hopefully coming back with your vote to continue to do what I can to help these communities and the state of New Hampshire. I feel I've been successful in my 4 years as state representative. I'd like to continue to serve And I'm really excited to be able to serve another town, Newton, in addition to Plastow and Southampton, where, as I mentioned before, I have contacts here and connections and family contacts. It's really a pleasure to sort of represent my family here, my new family, and my part family of Newton. So I ask for your vote and hopefully send me back to the House. Thank you.
Mr. Melvin.
Well, I hope you send me back as well, to be honest with you. I'd like to go back on municipal and county. I think I've done a very good job there. We had an incident where in the state of New Hampshire, there is only one dog officer elected in the state of New Hampshire, which is Danville. And that bill came in front of us because over in Danville, what happened is they had a dog officer, had a problem with the Board of Selectmen. This individual turned around and ran for the Board of Selectmen and won the Board of Selectmen, and then she ran for dog officer and won the dog officer's position. And what they did is they brought it to us in Concord and wanted us to deal with it. And what we did is we killed the bill right there. And that's what we need to do. Let the people make their own choices in the communities.
Mr. Summers.
Earlier, I had said that I was interested in the Science, Technology, Energy Committee and also, or Veteran Affairs. If I was able to get on the Science, Technology, Energy Committee, I would bring up, and I'd also go with a bill on the fact of clean energy as far as natural gas and the importance of it. In 2012, the cutback on coal, the coal plants in the state of New Hampshire were cut back to almost zero, which was cleaner for the environment, but it was replaced by 25% natural gas. Now, the only way we can get natural gas into the state of New Hampshire is through Canada or through a ship, LNG ship, into Fall River, Massachusetts, and then have it transported up here via either truck or rail. So because of the importance of natural gas, there's now a shortage on natural gas because, as you know, natural gas is a byproduct of oil drilling, and the lack of oil drilling and consumer oil drilling, where natural gas resides on the top of the oil, there's now a shortage. There's not only a shortage of natural gas, there's a shortage of diesel in the United States, where we're down to the lowest level of diesel we've been at in the United States since 1951. And natural gas is so low that there's actually threats of it being where the electricity, we're threatened to have blackouts this coming winter, as the winter time when everybody goes inside. Now, natural gas is the cleanest gas that burn. In fact, a lot of people said, and in fact, it was the argument by the Democrats back then to eliminate coal and to go to natural gas. But to bring back, now the natural gas is shorted because of the fact it's a byproduct of oil. Thank you.
Ms. Bishop.
Yes, thank you for having this event. I really appreciate everyone being here. I believe and I want to work for New Hampshire that is a place where families and everyone, not just families, can live, work, and thrive. I think that we need to have a lot of cooperation in Concord to make the necessary decisions to make it a fair and just society. I lost my train of thought. I believe in education, as I said, and I want to work where people can live in a community where property taxes are decreased and there is adequate housing, affordable housing and affordable health care. I am somewhat concerned about the mental health issue in the state, and I think that's an area I would like to concentrate on and deal with the situation of addiction.
Thank you very much. So thank you to all our panelists. Thank you to our audience for attending us. Thank you to the people who are observing over Zoom. Thanks for coming out tonight. Don't forget to go to the polls on Election Day. And remember, it's a pick 3 race for Rep District 20. So thank you very much and have a wonderful evening. Thank you.